So Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Ian. Yes, good to be on with you all this evening. Thanks very much for making the time to do so. Pleased to be taking us through yet another start to a new season, the 26-27 season. So for those who don't know me, my name is Matt Bryan. As Ian says, I'm the playing data manager for the RFU. So I help to oversee player registration, both adult and age grade from like a platform perspective, and also have a look at and work upon other types of playing data as well, such as competitions, matches data, and indeed community game data across the piece as a whole. As Ian says, please do get any questions that you have on the go into the chat. And as he also said earlier, if you're not familiar with the term, it's a webinar format this evening, and that's just because there's so many people on the call, which is great to see. So if it was open, we'd probably be here until this time next week. But do put your questions in the chat, and we will hopefully get through to them as quickly as we can. And anything that we need to follow up on, we certainly will do so. So we're going to start in a real positive way, I hope, by saying a big thank you to all of you. So I'm aware there'll be a lot of adult registrars on this call. Oh, excuse me, I've got just recovered from a bit of the lurgy, so I've got a bit of a croaky voice this evening. And a big thank you to all of you who've embraced adult registration since its introduction in the 24-25 season, and have helped us to get toward a total for this season just about to finish, because we go all the way up until the 30th of June, for just over 111,500 adult registered players, which is a fantastic effort, and we're aware that lots of work go into that, and it really is some really beneficial data that comes through from adult player registration and indeed age grade registration too. It really helps us to better understand the health of the game as much as we possibly can. We're able to do so much more now with the introduction of adult registration. So, for example, look at things like age grade transitions, and indeed where we need to possibly support the community game a bit more in certain areas, because it tells us where we should be doing that also. The breakdown of all of the players of the just over 111,500. So we had just under 90,000 men who were registered, which was just slightly up on the year before. And adult women was just over 21,500, which was significantly up. So that was up over 10%, I think, on the previous season. So good to see so many players engaging with the registration system. I'm now going to talk about the improvements that we're looking to make as a part of the season switchover process, the 26-27 season. And we'll go through these step by step. So appreciate some of these will be directly related to role holders on the call, and then some just might be a little bit of FYI, some information so you can see some of the wider changes that are happening with player registration. So one of the first things to focus on is that players, and I've just come off a call with some of the non-contact community, players from the 1st of July this year will be able to select a preference if they wish to play and register for contact, non-contact, or both. So that's a new improvement, and you can see some of the benefits and some of the reasons why we're doing that. It's something that was always planned to be introduced for some of those of you who've been on the journey a little bit longer with us and for adult player registration, you may recall that when we introduced it in the 24-25 season, it was always intended to be introducing non-contact registration at some point, and that is now essentially. So players will have the option to set a preference if they wish to register for contact, non-contact, or both. The default for those, for all players, and certainly for those renewing, will be set to contact. So, and the reason for that is, as you saw the great numbers there, we had over 111,500 players doing so. We're all about trying to reduce clicks where we possibly can, and we always understand that that's a balance in trying to ask people to engage with their own valuable data, which obviously it relates to clicks, as I call them. But the default will be that if you've got a contact player who's coming in and isn't interested for whatever reason in changing their preference to non-contact or to both, they will just breeze past that part of the form. So the default will be contact. They won't need to engage with that at all, and they won't need to do anything. from a simple drop down list if they do want to change it, and of course that will be up to the player if they want to do that. This will be hidden for certain levels of the game. I doubt there's anybody on from those levels, but just to say, if it's any players that are levels 1 and 2, so the professional contracted players in the men's game and level 1 respectively the women's game, they won't have that option to select that as their professionally contracted players, and it's unlikely that they'll be deviating from their main preference of contact. And some of the benefits there, which I touched on a couple of seconds ago, it really does help us to capture more the health of the game. Anybody in my view, and I'm sure everybody on the call, if you've got a rugby ball in your hand and you're playing rugby, whether that's 15-a-side, whether it's vets, it's 7s, it's 10s, it's age grade, it's walking rugby, it's T1, whatever it is, you're a rugby player, you're part of the rugby community, and it's right that you have the kind of the benefits afforded to you as a non-contact player also. The next one, sorry, just struggling my muscle. This is a little bit more of a kind of an FYI, because obviously this is a focus upon adult registration this evening. So age grade parents and players, they will be nudged to tell us which educational institution that they're in, and then if they are there, which format of rugby that they play. So if there are people with a dual role on the call, then that'll be useful for you also. But again, the benefits of this are for us to all to better understand the landscape and the health of the game, and to identify opportunities where there may be to potentially grow, or indeed capitalise upon and take advantage of schools who are potentially already playing, where schools may be potentially and linked together. Sorry, I'm just looking up a shiny surface. Clubs will be able to indicate within GMS whether they offer a non-contact T1 rugby option. So that will be within the organisational profile side of things, and I'll talk a little bit later on around the specifics of when you'll see the actual changes in the guides, etc. In a few minutes' time. So clubs will be able to select within GMS and say we offer non-contact or T1 rugby, and then that will pull through into finerugby.com, which again will be a good opportunity for clubs to fully showcase their kind of offering to potential new players. Adults under 25 will have the option to state if they attend a university, and if they do, the format of rugby, if any, that they play there. Important to state, and we'll make this clear as we possibly can in the guides and the further comments, which I'll touch upon later, this won't be a university's registration, but this is the opportunity, because that's already dealt with in university's registration, which launched at the same time in 24-25. But this will be an opportunity for players who potentially aren't registering at university to tell us if they attend university and if they play rugby there, and then again, ultimately, to play that back in the future, back to clubs, back to counties and CVs and all these kind of things, that they'll be able to better understand and see the landscape and potentially growth opportunities in their more local areas. And then finally, the main improvement is the playing up from age grade into adult rugby application processes. So the ones we're talking here about 17-year-olds who play into adult rugby. So we're not talking about under 13s that play up to under 14s potentially. All of those processes will be embedded in GMS. And that's something that we've made a commitment to do since the introduction of adult player registration. We started a little bit, for those who are familiar with the process, around CBs going in and denoting if the clubs are being signed off as being able to do that. This is now bringing all of that process into GMS. So the clubs will apply to their CB via GMS to be able to assess 17-year-olds to play adult rugby. And then once that's granted, if the CBs and the club decide that's the right thing to do, clubs will then be able to do the individual player application forms for 17-year-olds to play adult rugby, again through GMS. And then those will be directly submitted electronically and digitally to the CB. Those who are familiar with that process now will understand that it's a smart sheet process at the moment. That's being embedded into GMS. And some of the benefits there, it will be quicker. We understand with all new things and changes that it might take a little bit of time for people to get used to it, but the forms are much more automated in GMS. So for example, if you're applying for an individual player, you don't need to go and find their GMS ID, that just pulls through. If you need to, on the club application form, for example, communicate on the form to the CB DBS checks and enhancements, then you'll also be able to pull that through via GMS automatically as well. And then finally, sorry, Ian.
Yeah, that's fine. Go on, go.
And just finally on the bottom of the slide, all of these changes and improvements are subject to ongoing successful testing and development right up until the season switchover window. So these are the planned changes. We have no reason to think that they won't be, but if something's not right, then these things could change, but we don't expect that to be the case. Ian.
Awesome. A few questions coming in there, Matt. Probably
Cool. Yeah,
quite varied. So one from Sally, just around when does the transfer window open again? Probably a bit of detail there, but over to you, Matt.
Yeah, let's say that. So the transfer window is 1st of July. So you'll be able to transfer players again from the 1st of July onwards. The dates for the transfer windows for each respective competition for next season, you will be able to find those. I don't have those to hand, but if you're looking for when they close, you'll be able to look at those in Regulation 1. So if you just have a look on the regulations page or search up RFU Regulation 1, you'll find those dates there. Got something coming in a couple of slides' time on the transfer process as well, which may be of interest.
Amazing. Thanks, Matt. One from Tony Kipling. If they're at university, can they play for the club at home?
Yeah, a couple of things on that. Great question, Tony. Thanks for that. So what's not changing is universities' registrations. So if you are familiar with it now or not, any player who registers to at a university to play university-only rugby, and what we mean by that is largely books, so the British University's competition structure, then that won't change. You could register for 8 teams or clubs within a university. So let's say you're at a large university that's collegiate based, one which is where I'm from, near me is Durham. You could register for Durham University, you can register for Collingwood College, John Snow College, all of those, and none of those registrations, providing you're only playing university or intramural rugby, will ever impact upon a more traditional club. So a dramatic example could be you could register for 8 colleges at Durham Uni, you could register to play books for Durham University, and then you can go and register for Durham City that play in the men's leagues, or you could go and register for Nova Castrians women who play championship level in the women's game. Those two don't conflict at all. The second of three things on that is if your university or if that university is playing in the RFU leagues, then as you would probably expect, that does then potentially start to conflict. Durham University, again, is a good example. They've got a men's team which plays in the Durham and Northumberland counties leagues. If you were just playing university rugby, the previous statement applies. If you then get selected or it gets converted into an RFU registration to play for the men's team at Durham University on a Saturday in Counties 2 or Counties 1, whatever they'll be playing in next season, then that would be counted as any normal, typical registration at a typical club. So normally you would only be able to have one RFU registration. You wouldn't be able to go and play for the club. However, the third of 3 things on that is we have something called the student pass. Some of you on the call may be familiar with it, and I would strongly encourage you to search that and take advantage of it where you can do. So student pass, essentially where we have people eligible for that, so students, they are able to have 2 RFU registrations at the same time at women's level 2 and below, that's championship 1, and men's level 3 and below, so that's national 1. An example of that could be you could have a player who's from Exeter. I always like to do extremities for geography to illustrate the point. So you could have a player who's at Exeter or in or near Exeter, and let's say their home club is Exmouth, and they register to play for them on an RFU registration basis. They play on a weekend. They then go to Durham University, or let's say University of Newcastle. They may, with it being so far away, not go home each weekend for their rugby fix. They could then apply for what's called a student pass, and they could also have an RFU registration process in the Newcastle area. So an example for that could be, I used Nova Castrians earlier, they could play Nova Castrians, let's say every other week, and if they go back home to Exeter, to Exmouth, they could then play every other fortnight or whatever it might be for Exmouth as well. So do have a look at student pass as an option. the process for all that is embedded in GMS and has been for a couple of years now. Definitely something useful to get stuck into, particularly if you're either got potentially any students really, but a number of students at your club existing who may move away and want to do a little bit of both. But then also if you're near to a big university as well, where you get the kind of the vice versa.
Great answer. That's good stuff. There's another one in that's probably quite prevalent for a lot of people. It's just is registration for non-contact now compulsory?
So for this coming season, it would be an optional thing for players to do. Obviously, the more people that do that, the more that we can understand the health of those communities and those formats and those people wishing to play those formats. But for this coming season, it will be an optional preference to set. That may change the following season, but that's what it's going to be for 26-27 season.
Awesome. Excellent. There's a couple of other questions just probably to pick off and then we can move on.
Yeah.
What's the youngest age for non-contact registration was a question, but probably kind of answered that in the last bit.
Well, actually, so the youngest age for non-contact registration, you could argue, is under sevens, but that's because under sevens and under eights, they play non-contact formats as a kind of a fixed format. There's no other option for them. But the option to select contact, non-contact, or both will first be seen at under nines, and then all the way through to adults.
Excellent. And then there's one from Joe. Is there any change in regard to the actual registration of service players?
No change to service players there, Ian. They would, under regulation, are expected to still register, particularly for contact, but they will also have the option to select different formats if you wish.
Awesome. And just the final one before we move on is just a club have got some of their age grade players working or attending training provision. Is this an option to specify? That's from Stockton up north.
Okay, so do they mean and not necessarily an educational establishment maybe, or they could be doing like a training course as an apprenticeship type thing?
Yeah, maybe that, yeah.
Yeah, great question. We'll need to come back to you on that one. I think we're looking at more typical schools, colleges and universities, but I will check if training providers are also on that list, and we'll either put that in the comments, will be when the webinar is published maybe, or as a follow-up, but we'll take that one away.
Awesome.
And if that wasn't the question, then apologies, but yeah, do have another go.
Excellent. Cool. There's probably one. Yeah, that's it. We can move on.
Oh, cool. Do keep the questions coming in. So the previous screen talked about the kind of main headline improvements, but there's also two that are specific to adults. And even though it's a webinar format, I hope there's a couple of people cheering on this, because I'm really pleased to say that we're planning to finally find a solution for those adult players who, for whatever reason, in between seasons, wish to move clubs. It was introduced in a way that we never really wanted to do, but we had to do for a particular kind of legal and contract issue. What has happened up until now is that, let's say you've played, I'm going to use Nova Castrians again because it's a Newcastle club. Let's say you played at Nova Castrians this year, and for whatever reason you want to move to Seguil, Gosforth, or you want to move country or down other areas of the country with work, or you're relocating. The current process is that you must renew at your what would then be your former club, then go through a transfer process, and then ultimately move to your new club. You will not need to do that this coming season. And I'll explain the differences and where you still will need to do that. So if you do not register or renew your registration at the start of the season, switch at the start of the season for next season, I'll use that example. You were at Nova Castrians, you will be made inactive as a player. So the status of renewal required will hopefully disappear. You will be made inactive on the 30th of June via the work that we do in the background. That player will then be able to go in and afresh, then go and register straight away for Gosforth or Exmouth if they're going down to Exeter to keep on the theme. They will not need to renew and then transfer. We hope people see this as a benefit because it will hopefully help the player, that they'll not need to go on and re-register at a club or renew registration at a club that they, for whatever reason, don't intend to play at. And then, of course, saving that volunteer time and the registrar, that they'll then not need to then go and find the player, search for, and then transfer them in. I'm going to stop there, Ian, because I'm imagining we might have a few questions on that, and but stop me if I don't.
No questions on
Okay,
that.
right, okay.
Not
Okay,
not a
cool.
particular bit.
Okay, I'll just do the second part and then we'll take a pause again. And the player loan recall. So appreciate this will affect a small minority of people on the call, if anybody at all. So those who are familiar with loaning players out to clubs currently, it's a little bit of a clunky process to try and get them back. We will be automating that, and sort of semi-automating, I should say, into GMS. So you will be able to digitally recall that player from loan within GMS, which you can do now. And provided you do that before 12 o'clock on a Friday, that player will then be immediately recalled and then immediately available for you to select on your teams in your lineup. So if, as long as you do that before 12 noon on a Friday, which many of you will be familiar with, is a typical deadline on a lot of registration processes. So let's say that the player's been on loan there. If it's Friday morning, 9 o'clock, and you recall that player, that will be immediate. The player, the club who has the player on loan does not need to accept or have the option to decline. You will be immediately able to recall that player from loan. And once you do that before 12 o'clock, you will be able to select them on a match card straight away. And again, these two improvements are also subject to ongoing tests and development, of which things are going really well. Don't expect these to change, but just want to make that caveat that if something does go awry and we don't think it's right for the volunteer kind of workforce to see a change that we don't think is right, then we would reserve the right to pull that, but we don't expect that to be the case. Take a pause, Eddie, for any questions.
Yeah, just a question around the loan piece is just
Okay.
what level is that in terms of playing level?
Good question. Again, we'll come back on that. I think it's at all levels, but sadly on the loan piece, we're getting stuck into that one tomorrow, so don't quite have all the detail on that one, but we'll come back to you. Good question.
Good question, Tony. Yeah,
I do think it's all levels, but I will come back to you.
We'll confirm to everyone who's registered on the webinar with our follow-up anyway. And then there's one just going back. So there's no other questions on these two improvements here, but there's just one around the club approval process, an individual process for 17s playing adult rugby.
Okay.
That will now be fully visible on GMS, i.e. if they are not agreed, is the question. So it says, so the club approval process and individual process for 17s playing adult rugby will now be fully visible on GMS. For example, if they are not agreed.
Yes. So it sounds like the person who's posted that question is familiar with the process. If the CB reject that application, so the CB approver, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with that role because it sounds as if you would be, then they must supply a rejection note. They can't just reject, they need to state the reasons why. Hope that's the question. If not, have another go and we'll try and answer it again.
Excellent. Yeah, and just some feedback from John that the removal of the need to register for the old club before moving is a great move. So thank you, John.
Good. Please, thanks for that, John. Thought you might like that one. Something we always wanted to deliver. It just took us a little while to work out.
Another question, just probably a bit more detail around loans. So we might have to come back on this, but I'll read it out anyway. Is there a limitation on the amount of times you can loan a player? For example, at NC2, borrowing players from other clubs at NC2 or 3 level. We have people interested in dual registration for an NC3 team, as well as our club with NC2 teams. Is it better to borrow or dual register? Can you even dual register?
Well, so the answer to that, there's a few answers to that. So the loan kind of process is typically designed for RFU registered players, which in the women's game would be NC2 and above. Borrowing technically isn't a thing. You know, we understand, and we said this all along when adult player registration was introduced a couple of years ago, that it would take some time for people to fully understand it, get on board with it. Technically, borrowing went when adult player registration was introduced in 24-25 season, and was replaced with you need to be registered for the club that you're playing for. the answer to that one is if this and NC2 and NC3 is a really, really good example. We work with many forums and many committees with elected members from the community game when we designed adult player registration, and they were really clear that they wanted a mark between NC2 and NC3 to be and around those areas to be the RFU registered and club registered processes. So where you've got a club registered a player, that club registered player can currently register for 2 teams at any one time. So if the levels that you're at, the player only needs club registration, they can register for 2 clubs at any one time, and they can turn those over infinitely. So a dramatic thing would be, let's say they retain their main club registration as a common theme throughout the season, and if they wanted to, they could turn over that second registration at the club registration levels every week if they wanted to do that. The RFU registration levels are different. As I said earlier, when I give a student example, that typically means 1 registration only. And there's various reasons behind that, but there are nuances where you could change that, such as student pass, services pass. So we mentioned the student pass earlier. There's also something called the services pass, which works in exactly the same way. If you're eligible and you're services personnel and you can demonstrate that, you may be based away from home sporadically, whatever that might be, then you can also get to RFU registrations that way. So borrowing technically isn't a thing, but what we never want really is any kind of player registration to be a barrier to people playing. But there's also a kind of a line that we need to make sure that all players are getting a good level of experience. For example, the feedback was from the groups that we work with, they wouldn't really want to see players dropping down too many levels potentially, and when it might not be the best experience for all. So if the club registered, 2 clubs at any one time, and that can be turned over. RFU registered, other than the services pass, the student pass, it's 1 club only, but you can be loaned, but that's still only 1 RFU registration only. I'll tell you what we'll do, Ian. A few of those we'll kind of bucket those up together and then signpost people to all of the loan questions within the regulations. I think that's probably the best thing to do with those questions.
Question in from Linda Buckton. If a player is RFU registered, do they have to renew, or is the new process the same for club and RFU registered?
Yeah, same process. Yeah, same process. So if you were RFU registered last season, without the player even realising it, the RFU registration will be there to renew. The only caveat to that are for those clubs who sadly got relegated at the end of this season. So if you got relegated from, from level 8 to level 9 in the men's game, and from level 4 to level 5 in the women's game, so from NC1 to NC2, then you will have your players automatically converted from RFU registration to club registration. If you get promoted, and congratulations to those who have, so those who are kind of leapfrogging those who have sadly been relegated, the feedback continues to be the clubs wish to then uplift those players that they wish to from club registration to RFU registration, because it may be the discussion we had, or the question we had a couple of minutes ago, it may be that you don't want all of those converted to RFU registration because you have some players who want to play a bit more flexibly. So for those of you, if you're coming from level 9 to level 8 in the men's game, from level 5 to level 4 in the women's game, then you will, any player that you want to be eligible for your first team, you would need to then uplift them from club registration to RFU registration.
Excellent. And probably just a last question before we move on. Will there be a review on the transfer window? Our players are RFU level, but not professional. And every year we have players who are unable to join us to play for the last few months of the season.
So there is a piece of work that is going to have a look at the transfer deadline to check that it is fit for purpose. That can't change for the coming season, excuse me, because in regulations like that, we obviously need to notify the game in advance when things like that are going to happen. But I know that there is a piece of work that is currently planned. So this isn't Matt Ryan sat here saying that's all definitely going to change, that work's all definitely going to take place. But I can see in the scheme of things and in the schedule that there is a piece of work to look at the transfer window to check that it's still fit for purpose. any changes from that would be largely implemented from the 27-28 season.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. That's
No worries.
all the questions.
Yeah, loving those questions. Please do keep them coming in. Keeps us on our toes. So key dates and communications then. So we from 1st of July, the planned date is that registration will reopen. That's an easy one. We have what we call kind of renewal journeys and player journeys, and what we mean by that are the email notifications that we send largely to players and to parents for age group, and also to wider club roles. Pleased to say that we're going to introduce a new journey or a new email for that. Excuse me. From the week commencing 23rd or 22nd of June, I think it is, we will be emailing specific role holders with the changes that are specific to them. So if you're on this webinar this evening, you've understood everything so far, great. If you're thinking, I'm still not entirely sure what that means to me as an adult registrar, or if you happen to be an adult player, we will be emailing you directly with the improvements and the changes that are being made from the week commencing the 23rd. So if you're an adult registrar, excuse me, you will see the changes made to you in that email, the reasons why they've been made, and a little bit more information to boot on that as well. That's hopefully seen as a benefit. So that'll be a little bit of a heads up in addition to the kind of webinar this evening that'll come ahead of the season switchover. Then from, excuse me, the 6th of July, adult registrars and some wider club roles will then get further specific information on those changes. So it'll be a reminder that season switchover and registration is now open. But then at that point, you'll also get specific links to specific guides, some of the videos. So if you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to steal Ian's thunder, but the Community Rugby digital YouTube channel, which Ian will touch upon later, we will be updating some of those videos that are on there to introduce the new parts of the registration form, for example, and the new guides on Community Rugby Help, or the updated ones. You'll get information and links directly to that content from the 6th of July. I do apologise for clearing my thoughts so much. I'm just getting over a bit of the lurgy. And then from the 7th of July for adult players, the players will then start receiving emails directly and notifications to renew their registration. So these will be existing players, obviously, because otherwise we wouldn't know that they're a player. So anybody that ends this season with an active registration, they will be made inactive, not renewal required as the plan on the 30th of June. We will then email them to prompt them to register. So what we hope this does is a number of things. It hopefully, the relationship between players and clubs is always going to be the strongest, and that's always where that's going to be the strongest and the most communication would and indeed should take place. We hope that the support that we can provide from the centre to prompt those players to register is sharing some of those admin tasks, and we can now start to see which emails, for example, and which content becomes most effective. So we can see which type of messaging appeals to players most, because we can see how many are opening them. We can see how many are actually clicking on the links of them to then go on and register. And we'll of course take the learnings from that last season, and then bake that into the journeys that we're doing over the summer. So they will get information. Registration is open. We will do that in a layered level. So it's likely that from the 7th of July, we will start with the high end of the game. And then ultimately over the next kind of 3 or 4 days, we will then kind of come down the pyramid, as it were, and they will get similar to the content that the roles holders will get on from the 6th of July, which will be links to specific content. They've already hopefully got the email from the week commencing the 23rd of June, which explains the changes that are coming. This time they'll see them specifically, the how-to guides if they need them, or if they're happy to, which most players are, to be fair, they just click on the link and then hopefully renew their registration. They will get... Players will get up to 6 email notifications to renew their registration. Should they even do it before the 7th of July, which we can see that some players do that, they'll get no email at all. So again, it's a dynamic journey that we've been able to embed so that we're not pestering people when we don't need to. If they then, for example, renew the registration after email 3, they will not see and not receive email 4, 5, and 6. Naturally, there'll always be like a half a day overlap when we generate these audiences. So let's say if somebody's registered on the day that email number 4 is due to go at 11 o'clock and they do it at 9, it's likely they'll receive email 4, but they certainly shouldn't be receiving email 5 and 6. A couple of other specific journeys that we've been able to do in there now, again, as a result of the introduction of adult player registration, we'll be tailoring, if there's anybody from universities, we'll be tailoring the university renewal journey and making that specific email renewal journey this year. So last season, they were kind of all embedded with adults altogether. The university, so those who've got a specific university's registration, they won't be prompted to register until around about the end of August, beginning of September. If you've got a player who's at your club, who plays for your more typical rugby on a Saturday or a Sunday, they will still get that renewal email for your club from the 7th of July. It just so happens if they're also and therefore registered at a university, they won't get that particular nudge to register until the end of August and the beginning of September. And another improvement that we've made is we will be specifically supporting those players who essentially leave an age grade rugby to register as an adult. Again, one of the things that we always said, one of the things that we were looking at was improving the data we could see and supporting people to play for longer. So we will be emailing parents first and foremost around about season switch over time, where they have a child who was coming to the end of their age grade rugby journey and notifying that parent of all the admin tasks that they need to do digitally in the background to hand over the account to their 18-year-old child or soon to be 18-year-old child. They, or 18-year-old adult as it were, once they've hopefully done that, we will then directly contact those 18-year-old players who are too old for age grade and have not yet registered as an adult. If they've registered an adult, we won't bother them. If they're yet to register as an adult, we will be taking them on up to three email journey to essentially try and support and prompt them to make that transition from age grade into adult rugby. Pause there for any questions, Ian.
Yeah, we've got a couple of probably more clarifications. One of them from Stephen is that not all players use email, and GMS emails tend to go to the junk file. But probably what we want to say is we have a number. It's not a GMS email, Stephen. So every player, every individual in GMS has a unique email address that goes into our CRM system, and actually the emails that are produced that Matt has just talked about are going to players direct from that based on their communication preferences. So if they've put that they want to receive emails from the RFU example, but there is also the fact that this is a regulatory task and something that a player needs to do. So hence why they will receive an email, which is a lot more successful than some emails that come directly from within the GMS platform, which is what you've referred to. So just wanted to clear that one up. And then another one, Matt, just so everyone's crystal clear, is from John Badet. And he said, when will we get the link to renew? Will that be in the 23rd of June email to registrars so we can forward it on? Do you just want to clarify?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I know you want to touch on QR codes later. So there will be no link to renew from the 23rd of June because you won't be able to, because the season switchover date is the 1st of July. And in any case, the link will always just take the player to the login screen for GMS anyway. Obviously, they can't bypass the login screen and just land straight on a player registration because they need to log into the platform first. There'll be no link on the 23rd of June, as I think would be expected. But from the 1st of July onwards, and indeed from the 7th from players, they will get a link that will take them to their login screen in GMS. They will then land on their personal dashboard, and then waiting for them will be a banner which says renew registration. If they choose to renew at their existing club, they will do that. They then may choose, as we touched upon earlier, to go and register a new club, and they'll also be able to do that as well. And I know, Ian, you're going to touch on QR codes a little bit later on.
Yeah, amazing. But there's just one more question in, and it's probably worth bringing this out just so everyone's clear. It's from Rebecca Skinner. So we have a first team who need to be RFU registered and a second team who need to be club registered. If we wish a second team player to play for the first team, what is the expected time to process the uplift? And then a secondary part to that is we found by RFU registering all our players, it stops second team players playing at other clubs. Could the levels where RFU registration is required be reviewed?
Okay, nice to be in touch again, Rebecca. Had a good time down the southwest. Around about this time last year. Thanks for hosting us then. Um, so a few questions there. So if you are a club registered player at the same club where you need to be RFU registered, there is no 7-day wait period to do so. The 7-day wait period is only in place for transfers. So if you are a club registered player at Exmouth and you need to therefore be RFU registered, then that would go through the following day, like all brand new RFU registrations would. So if you're a club registered player right up until 23rd of March, and forgive me if that's a weekend, but let's say it's a Wednesday. If you then RFU register that club registered player, then they will be RFU registered and active from the following day. It's only on transfers where there's a 7-day wait period. So I hope that clears that up. I think there was a question there on where and when RFU registration and club registration levels should apply. So we did do a little bit of background work on that this year to see if that could or should be changed. And it wasn't something that progressed at that time. It will be something that is always up for review. So my feedback to you, Rebecca, and to anybody else on the call is if you've got any strong views on that, would be to contact whoever your elected representative are on what's called your organising committees. Now, we have those set up for men's rugby. We don't have them set up for women, but I'll explain how we can do that in a second. So how that would work would be Cornwall, Devon, and any other CB across the country. They have at least one elected representative which sits on the regional organising committees for the men's game. So typically North, Midlands, London South East, and indeed the Southwest in this case. That would be some feedback that you would provide to them. As staff, we don't, and rightly so, we don't get the power to change regulations. It's our elected volunteers that do that, and that is right, on subcommittees and councils and what have you. But the route there, that if you did have some strong feelings on whether that would change, would be to find out who your elected representative on the Southwest Region Organising Committee is, and probably also with dropping your council member a line as well. But as with all of these things, they can be up for review for subsequent seasons.
Cool. And just one more.
Sorry. I was going to talk about the women's game as well. The women's game don't have a regional organising committee. It is a staff member who most of you will deal with in Sabrina or women's competitions at rfu.com. I think the email is. By all means, drop an email there. But definitely the more executive kind of volunteer route, elected member would be to maybe drop your council member a line.
Amazing. Thanks for that answer, Matt. And just link to that last one before we move on, from Sandra Coffin. If you uplift on a Friday to RFU registration, are they able to play on the Saturday?
No, so you need to make sure that any uplift is done. So it's always the following day. So if you did it on a Friday, then the valid 2 date would be from the Monday.
Thanks, Matt.
And again, if you have any strong feedback that you think that should change, that would be a regulation change, and the same route would apply. So your regional organising committee elected rep or your council rep.
Good stuff.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. So let me go back to sorry. Actually, Ian, it's over to you.
It is over to me. So we just wanted to share some support, top tips, and where the resources are for you guys to access. On screen now is an example in the player management module, which for those newbies, you can find in the top left-hand 9-grid iron. Click on player management and it will take you to this dashboard. Key things to look at on this page, which were just highlighted there. And if you click again, Matt, with the first one that's highlighted there at the top, the age grade players piece, that will show how many players have been at your club that have played age grade and gone into adult. And if you click on that, it will take you through to the list of players in the grid. Likewise, you can see the age grade players active in the previous season, etc. But then for adults, if you cast your eyes to the bottom of the page, you can see when those players have last logged in. So if you're to, and that is really to support them renewing their registration essentially. So you can see, and it will give you a good indicator of how many of your players at your club are logging in. So you can see if you click on those two grids there, if you clicked on all adult players that have logged in, it will take you through to the 4 people there that have logged in. Likewise, if they've not logged in, it will take you to a list there, which potentially will be a bit larger than 1. Excellent. If you move us on there, Matt. A new enhancement this season, and many of you will be familiar with these QR codes. They were originally in the home dashboard, but they were quite hidden, like at the bottom of the page. You had to scroll down a bit. So we've got a quick links menu item. So this can be found and will be found from the 1st of July onwards in the organization profile module. And in the menu on the left-hand side there, you'll see it highlighted in blue is quick links. So it'll be just a bit quicker for you to access these links to distribute. And you can see the different types of links and QR codes that you can copy and distribute however you see fit in your club. I've seen some great examples of clubs doing this across the country, especially with the registration of new players link. I've seen it in clubhouses. I've seen it in changing rooms, but also a good example here. If you are using membership within a GMS and choosing that as your optional feature, then there's some good benefits there with the QR code. So yeah, new place for the QR codes, bit quicker for you guys to access. Really good place to get new parents, new players to have a look at, and get quicker access to be able to register to play at your rugby club. So yeah, worth checking them out. Cool. So a big bit of feedback this year, and what we noticed quite a lot this year was around there were at points in the year large pending registrations. So you can see highlighted on the screen. So to get to this page, you will see this if you have the role of adult male or female registrar with the permission level of 3 or 5 assigned to you. And you can access this via the player management module. And then this is the registration overview dashboard. Now, this may look depending on the level that you play. So if you're level 1 to 8 in the men's game or 1 to 4 in the women's game, then it may look, there may be some more tables underneath this. But essentially, what you're looking for here is, and what's highlighted is the pending registrations. And these pending registrations are almost always new players at your club, but can occasionally be a returning player if they've come returning. So worth checking the pending registrations because they're new people at your club, and you can simply click on the pending registrations and it will take you straight through to in this example, 2 pending club registered male players. So that's really useful bit to check in on as a registrar. And if you're not a registrar on this session, worth feeding that back to whoever is an adult male or female registrar at your club, as it's just a useful page to give you an overview of where your registrations are at, and what and how that's going that season, and if you do have any pending that you need to have a look at and action.
Yeah, good point here, because on the pending, even at this stage of the season, if you have pending players there still, they essentially will be wiped at the end of the season, because we will recognise that the clubs didn't accept them as players. So if you have some players there, even if you know they're there, or if not, then do log in and check. And if you're thinking, well, there's no point in me accepting that now, I missed that at the time or whatever, it is still worth accepting them as players, even at this late stage, because it is only active players of the season that we will take on that renewal journey. So all of the email content that we covered a few moments ago, none of those players, unless you process them, will see that. So it can be a lost opportunity for us to potentially support from the centre on retaining them as a player. So even if today, tomorrow, and right up until the 29th of June, you've got pending players there. If you process them, they will still become active and will still hopefully benefit from that registration renewal journey.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. So resources to support you. So Matt's talked through the communications plan that we've got to support all our clubs in getting players to renew their registrations. And hopefully you may have seen the community game update with some information in for administrators to have a look at. Key other places to look at for support and resource are Community Rugby Help, where there is a number of articles relating to adult player registration from an adult point of view, an admin point of view, and an adult player point of view. There's articles on every process around adult registration. So we talked about player loans earlier. There's articles that will be updated around all these processes within GMS. So Community Rugby Help is the place to go. There's a nice search bar in there. We can search topics and it will come up with the relevant articles. We can click through to the relevant information on the page. It's really quite easy to use. It is also the place where if you've got a technical issue or you're really struggling and you can't find something, where you can submit a help ticket. One of the service desk team will be able to support you with your query. So a really useful place to look at. It's also the place where you can access our Community Rugby Digital YouTube channel. You can also access it in other ways, as you usually would in Google or searching it. But Community Rugby Digital is where we house all our webinars. So this webinar that we're doing tonight will be housed on Community Rugby Digital YouTube. We have an adult player registration playlist, really useful playlist. We've had great feedback from the game and our user groups around how useful the playlist and the videos are, especially for sharing with players on how to do things, but also just from an admin perspective, what you need to do, short, sharp clips around how to do a task. So they've gone down really well. Worth checking that out and having a look around that page if you get a chance. And we've obviously got our 24/7 access with the Community Rugby Help and the YouTube, but we also got that next level of support for those that are maybe new to the platform or really struggling with GMS. I have a team of 7 GMS support trainers who are highly experienced at using GMS. They've been in place now for 4 years, and they're available to support on an online basis, one-to-one, or we can do group sessions, but tend to do one-to-one sessions with individuals from clubs. So they are an option, and they, again, if you want to access that support, then you can either go on englandrugby.com or you can go on Community Rugby Help and search GMS training, and it will come up with where you need to submit an expression of interest form, where we will assess that and then align you with a GMS support trainer. So lots of support and resource out there for you to check out. Cool, that's amazing. We've had a couple of questions in, and it's great to see. Nice comment there from Rebecca. Great to see some improvements coming through, and comms are so much better than a couple of years back. That's lovely feedback, Rebecca. Thank you. But we've got a question from Gareth Charles. Matt, this might be good to reiterate. In terms of upgrading from club to RFU registered, is the option to expedite at cost by noon on Friday still available for selection on the Saturday?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Good. And
I also noted, sorry to interrupt, Tony's question on the, I don't think I fully answered that earlier because I'm just seeing the question now. So I think, Tony, what the question is here is referring back to when we talked about the individual player form going from the club in GMS through to the CB approver. I think the question you answered is, do they still need to register player after that? Yes, you do. So that hasn't changed. We've just brought the Smartsheet offline process into GMS, or we will be doing, which will hopefully save time because we've seen the automation that form can provide. So, for example, you don't need to go looking for DBS numbers and all that kind of stuff. You just put the person in, and it all comes up. So Yeah, you still will need to register the player as well.
Excellent. Last chance to put any questions in. It's great. That's great to hear, Tony, that you're new to this all, but it looks great. So yeah, check out those that support that's available. Really useful to have a look at that, and great to have you on tonight. I'm glad you're finding it informative. Um, any more questions? Pop them in the chat or put them in the
Just
Q&A.
while people are doing that, Ian, just while they're thinking of any last minute questions there. So yeah, just the key dates again. 1st of July, obviously, is season switchover. That's the planned date. It is possible, as in previous years, you could see some things released ahead of that, which we covered in the community game update article last week. We would just ask that if you do see it, we're doing it because it's just the right thing to do to release some things a little bit early. But we would just ask that you probably hold off doing any tasks until the 1st of July. We've never seen this before, because some people have gone early, but we just wouldn't want you doing things twice. So if you do see some things come out early, it's probably wise just to wait until the 1st of July, until things will be completely fully supported and up and running.
No problem. And just for everyone, I've just popped in the link to the latest community game update in case you haven't seen that and you want to have a look. There's links in the chat. Excellent. Well, I think we'll close the session there. Thanks very much for giving your time tonight. Really appreciate it. It's been a great session. Lots of awesome questions. This will be available on Community Rugby Digital YouTube, and I will email that link out to everyone who's registered for this webinar by the end of this week. So do look out for that. Thanks for coming and have a good evening.
Thanks all.